one of my favorite people in the world. And yes, even better than Earl Hebner, Brian. Yes, I even put him up there better than
Whoa.
Earl. Yeah, I know.
Daniel,
One of my favorite people.
Daniel, you're so full of shit. We just started.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Well, he's
Yeah.
former WB superstar. OVW's the guy who runs behind OVW, the man who does everything. He was on Wrestlers Netflix. Ladies and gentlemen, Al Snow.
Thank you guys for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Ow, I have to ask you, brother. I'm coming right out the jump. I'm coming right out
Uh-oh.
the jump.
Uh-oh.
Oh God, here we go. Write
Oh
this
No,
no.
down.
Oh no.
I want to get your true thoughts because we had a podcast last week and we involved you in it. You just
Oh.
didn't know about it because we wanted to know what you would say.
Okay.
Oh, that's right.
I placed bets and I want to hear what you want to say. And you could give your honest, well, there's no doubt you're going to do that. But The Rock recently came out and he was on the Pat McAfee show. And he basically said, to just sum it up, wrestling's fake and it's been that way forever. It's not going to change. It's always been fake. It is still fake. You guys need to grow up and figure out that's what it is. Al, please don't make me wrong. Your thoughts on that statement?
It's complicated. He's right. I mean, look, everyone has known that wrestling has been predetermined. The word fake doesn't really apply. It doesn't work.
Mm-mm.
It isn't fake. Everything that happens in the ring is physically is quite real. It's the intent with all of us that are in the ring that is what is not real. Like for the referees, you're to portray the intent that you're there to do the two primary jobs, which are to ensure a fair and equitable contest, and then for the safety of the competitors. Those are, and you have to portray that. Otherwise, then we can't continue the illusion of our intent, which is that we're competing in a physical combat contest and trying to win. That's all we're ever really trying to convince the audience of, and that's all the audience wants to be convinced of.
Right.
But then you get into, and people have known, since the 1940s that wrestling's predetermined. I mean, it's been a pretty well-known fact, and I don't know why, even in this day and age, that we still are even debating that. Like everyone's still especially in the wrestling business itself these days, all seem to act and believe that this has just been a revelation that just came around in the last 15, 20 years, or when Vince went to, you remember Jimmy, when he went to the New Jersey Athletic Commission and tried to get them to
Right.
governing wrestling in the state of New Jersey because of the financial drain that it had, as if it was a real competitive sport when it wasn't. And everyone knew it.
Right.
Then you kind of get into the whole, yeah, we know it, and this is the thing that everyone doesn't understand anymore these days about kayfabe and what it was and what it really kind of still is, and and everybody thinks that they have their own interpretation when really, in fact, it all comes down to that it's simply and has always been a respect for the audience. There's always been this unspoken thing between professional wrestling and the audience where we kind of look at each other and they go, we know that you know that we know, and we're not going to ruin it for ourselves by telling you. And you kind of look at them and you go, we know you know, and we're not going to let you know that we know, and we're not going to ruin it for you as well. So, because ultimately they desperately want so they can be entertained. I mean, it's no different than going to a magic show, oh wow, here's a news report. Holy shit. It's not real. Oh, what? You're crazy. No, not real. They're not actually altering, reality or, defying the laws of physics in any way. It's a gimmick. It's a trick.
Al, did you find it to be appropriate though?
I don't know if it was appropriate in the sense that I think that, he got a little emotional and got carried away. But you got to keep in mind too, he's addressing an audience it's a niche audience. It's not the general audience. You know, and in my opinion, which costs what it costs, it's worth what it costs to get, which is nothing. Okay, is that there's a way that you can handle this day and age where you're not insulting people's intelligence, but at the same time allowing them to believe. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, it's clear an audience wants to believe. They want to believe in the two things that we're always selling, which are who that wrestler is, and they want to believe in why they're doing it. That's it. They don't want to believe in the moves. They don't give a shit about the moves. They want to believe who and why. Okay. So, and we know we don't want to violate that because now it makes it harder, to get them to believe, which means that they then buy a ticket. And anyone that wants to argue that, think back a couple of years ago, there was a huge, just huge outcry on the internet when Game of Thrones, which is really immensely popular television series on HBO, when won the final season, somebody left a Starbucks cup in one of the scenes. People stroked out over the fact that Starbucks cup was in there because it took you out of the moment. And it's kayfabe's no different than a Hollywood movie producer. When you go watch a movie, they're going to take every step and effort, and they're going to spend. And that's where a large amount of money in those movie budgets go. Is like you go watch a Western. Well, they're gonna literally have somebody who researches what that time period was, what the wallpaper should look like on the walls, what the hardware on the doors should look like, what the food utensils should look like, what the atmosphere should be, etc. So that you never see anything that while you're in the movie theater takes you out of that world. Simple as that. They spend an enormous amount of money on that. After every scene, they start taking pictures so they can always keep continuity so that there's not a break in allowing you to be enveloped in the story. Well, wrestling, unfortunately, it's very similar. It's just basically physical storytelling within the context of a competitive situation. It's very similar to a movie. It's just live action. But the problem is we don't get the break.
Right.
Hollywood created the gimmick of a movie star celebrity so they could now, like, you enjoy Tom Cruise in one of his movies. There's no guarantee that you're going to now be motivated to want to pay to see Tom Cruise again in the next one that he's in, which is sometimes a year, 2, 3 years apart. Well, how do we keep him relevant? How do we keep him in your eye, in your mind's eye, and keep him, you're aware of him, and keep you interested and wanting to buy a ticket to see him? Well, we create the gimmick movie star.
Right.
Now he lives a life that you want to live, and you keep interested in him and what's going on. And that's the whole purpose for that. It's not real. It's a work too. Granted, I mean, they live pretty good lives. I'm sure they don't, job is to sell tickets. Use acting as a vehicle to sell tickets. But you as a wrestler, that's your job. Your job is to allow an audience to believe fully in who you are and why you're doing it. And that doesn't mean like, the tired, simplistic approach of, oh, I'm a heel, so I got to be an asshole the whole time. Look, you can beat a lot of actual athletes at conventions and stuff. And brother, let me tell you, like they can be heels. Reggie Jackson, nice to me, Then I'd watch him interact with other people, like I watched him interact with Ric Flair, and purposely needling Flair, trying to stir him up, and he was an asshole.
Right.
He was a heel. Uh, but in the wrestling world, for some reason, we literally applaud guys like MJF. We applaud guys like Matt Hardy. Oh my God, hey, it was genius. He was on a podcast. He never broke character. Oh my, where did that come from? We've been doing that for decades. Okay? Now all of a sudden, when guys do it, you admire them, but then you also on the other side of the coin want to just go, we don't need to do that. Everybody knows. And to a certain niche audience, the backstage after the show, press conferences that they do appeal to a niche audience, but again, that's going to be a very small, very niche audience. It's not going to be the general Mr. and Mrs. Walmart who just go, I just want to watch wrestling. My internet experiences are going to consist of going on and watching this press conference. And that's the same for movies.
Yeah.
Behind the scenes making of that are going to appeal to a certain audience.
Yeah.
But it's not going to appeal to the mass audience who goes, I just want to go watch a movie. I
Right.
love Tom Cruise. I want to go watch him in Mission Impossible. I hear he does his own stunts. So, it's the American Jackie Chan. Which is fine for them, and again, when Rock's doing that on Pat McAfee, again, realize, there's a niche audience that are into sports that are going to listen to Pat McAfee. And there's a niche audience that are going to be into wrestling that are going to listen to Pat McAfee, and they may be interested in that. But
I think it's interesting that you made that comparison because, people aren't going to tune into Pat McAfee and hear Rock and go and look at their buddy and go, see, I told you. I told you, you didn't believe me. But the other reference you made was to the Game of Thrones with the Starbucks cup and stuff like that. And that's something that kind of, like you said, the audience wants to sit there and believe. They want to take it in. Whatever it is, that hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, they throw everything out of their mind and they just want to sit there and be entertained. Do you think, and I'm not pointing my fingers at any company in particular, but there are sometimes out there when I'm watching where I could sit back, I want to sit back and watch it as a fan, as opposed to the referee's eye, which picks up little things here and there. Thanks to you guys for teaching me that stuff. Um, but it's almost like sometimes they're their own worst enemies with their presentation in ring, which takes me completely out of it because I'm going, look, I want to believe, and I get it. We stretch the boundaries of what we do, but don't just throw it in my face by doing these choreographed, synchronized, dance moves in my,
they can, and that gets into a whole different realm to me, because it now gets into the fact that everyone now within the business has kind of lost track of what we're selling. Okay. The majority of talent that are in the business today believe that what they're selling is the physical action and the pain of it. And an audience will never relate to that. They just don't, because they've never been in the ring and they've never even hit the ropes. So they don't know what it feels like. They don't know what a bump feels like. And if anybody that's listening to this doubts it, the next time you're at a show, listen to the number of people that go near the ring and kind of put their hand on it and smack it and go, ooh, that's hard. I didn't realize it was that hard.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Mind, they think it's a trampoline or a mattress. Okay.
Right.
No, for a fact, that ain't the case. They've never been drop kicked. They've never been, backdropped. Of course, depending on what neighborhood they live in, who knows? But it's all relatability, and for that's why UFC changed their rules and made to where the fighters had to stand up more, because if you watch UFC, you watch MMA, the minute that the guys go down on the mat, the vast majority of the audience gets lost a little bit because they can't relate to missions and the stuff that's going on the ground. If it happens quickly, but when it takes too long, well, that's why the ref steps in and stands them back up, because that's more relatable. The striking is more relatable. That's why, the best analogy I can give you is that, that's why in the United States, that's why we have huge, stadiums for baseball, football, because everyone's played baseball as a kid, even if it's just your backyard. You played football. You've played basketball. That's why the NBA is so popular. Here it's even more popular in China. Why? Because the Chinese started watching the NBA and kids playing basketball. That's why hockey is more popular in Canada than the United States. More people play hockey. That's why the top three, I always tell this to people because everyone's always surprised. The top three televised sporting events in the world are as follows. Number one is the World Cup of Soccer. Nothing outdoes it. Why? because around the rest of the world, more people play soccer. That's the number one sport in the world. Number two, nobody ever guesses this, is cricket. Literally, I've watched that game. I could never in a million years figure that thing out. I don't understand. There are billions of children who play cricket, and it's the number two watched sporting event. Number three is rugby, and the reason why is because those are the three most played sports around the rest of the world. So there's a direct connection and relatability. That's why there's more old white men playing golf and watching it on TV than there is any other audience.
Okay, Al, I don't mean to cut you off, but I'm cutting you off. I need you to take your hand and I need you to smack yourself. Okay. Stop making sense right now.
Okay.
Okay.
Right.
Dude, that is brilliant. I've never heard that. And the way that you used, oh my God, I never put it in that perspective. And the way you used how everybody has played baseball for the most part, everybody's played football. It makes so much sense. It makes so much sense. Daniel, I want to get you in because I know you're dying to, and I don't want to hog the floor because everyone wants to talk to Al because everybody wants what? Ed.
If I can just really quickly before you jump in, Daniel, because you brought up the hockey thing, and here's one of the things.
Of course, he's going to talk about hockey.
Just a little head, because look, since I was a little kid, there were two sports that I watched nonstop since I was like 5 years old, and that's pro wrestling every weekend up here in Toronto, and hockey night in Canada. I was a diehard Maple Leafs fan. I'm one of the few people who was alive the last time they won the Stanley Cup, and I'm praying this year that they do it before my time comes. The one thing is, I think fandom has changed over the years too, because as much as I've watched hockey over the years, and I think I know the game to a certain aspect, and I think I understand the game, but I don't believe for 1 second that I've been watching hockey for almost 60 years that I could walk in there and coach the Toronto Maple Leafs to a Stanley Cup. Whereas wrestling fans today have, they get that curtain peeled back a little bit, and all of a sudden they think they may know certain things, but they don't understand.
Certainly, yeah, but look, that's everybody and everything.
Mm-hmm.
We have access to information more so now than we've ever had at any other point in time in history.
Right.
I can go literally on this little device that I carry in my pocket, and I can Google anything and get information. Thing is, where we get lost is one, passion. Okay, so you're going to have, like you're a diehard hockey fan, but there are those that are diehard baseball fans and diehard football fans, basketball, whatever the sport may be. Okay, and that passion is going to lead them to then question a lot of decisions and things that are made, or judge and have an opinion and critique. And that's fine. That's a niche audience. The vast majority are not going to be that involved, to that point where they're going to be, remember Pat Kenny would when Notre Dame, and he'd get so upset he'd go outside and he'd take his Notre Dame flag off.
He was just insanely into that though. God.
Yeah, he was a fanatic. So you've got the fanatic who drive the business, which is great. But you have to understand, no ifs, ands, or buts. This isn't a debatable thing. You can have access to information on any topic you want, but until you have a commensurate amount of experience about that topic, you don't have any real knowledge. So, for instance, you can go to medical school right now, and you can go for whatever specialty you want to go, anywhere from 8 to probably 10 years. I think you got to go to medical school for certain specialties. So, when you graduate, you're not a doctor. You're not a doctor until you've had a certain amount of hands-on experience that's been supervised, to couple with all of that information you learned in school to then acquire the title of being a doctor. That's how it works. I can go to Lowe's this weekend and replace my faucet in my bathroom, but it doesn't make me a plumber, you know, because I don't have the experience. Therefore, I don't have the knowledge that a plumber would have. So we got to keep that in mind. And again, keep in mind, it's the vocal niche minority audience that speaks out, and we cannot allow that to dictate. We can appreciate the passion and the desire to express an opinion, but we can do it without now it influencing our performance. Because unlike other sports, since wrestling is a pseudo sport and a pseudo competition, a lot of the fans don't understand that when they're upset or they're not liking something, sometimes that's the way we orchestrated the whole situation, was to do exactly that, because you're then not going to get that payoff for it until 6 months from now. And that's where the knowledge comes from, you know, by the experience, as opposed to just having access to information. And maybe, you know, we're wanting you to feel outraged. Two, we're wanting you to have those reactions. And three, that'll allow us to understand where we want to go with the story 6 months, a year, 2 years forward. You know, that's our objective, is to elicit an emotional response. And yeah, that means that a lot of times, especially from that vocal minority, we're going to get a lot of criticism, you know, because of the fact they have access to information, you know. But
But is any of the information, like, think about this? WWF Bite This, Tough Enough, Gut Check, Wrestlers on Netflix, something we were a part of. It's no different than what we've been kind of doing for the last 20 years. The fact that WWE is now doing an Unreal series is gonna pull back the curtain more for them. So there's always been little bits of kind of here's how the business works in the public eye, right?
nobody will ever understand it unless you do it.
Well, no, true, 100%, absolutely. You can watch Tough Enough to it's blue in the face and sort of know how to take a bump until you get out there and do it 100 times, take those bumps, and go out and actually try to put together a match and do a match. You're never going to know. You're never going to get it.
Uh, if you're one of those fans, it might give you a greater appreciation and respect for it, but
Yeah.
it's really not going to. The only thing that I caution against, and people will go, well, you're a hypocrite. Well, yeah, I am. We all are. I'm probably the biggest. So, you know, get that out of your goddamn system. So the only thing I caution against is this. And I think that I know for a fact in Tough Enough, we never pulled the curtain back far enough to really reveal anything other than what it physically took to do it. Uh, Same with Gut Check, not really. You know, we walked that line, and you know, and the reason I know that is because I produced the Gut Check segments. I literally went out and did the personality profile on the guys, and we tried to sell who they were and now motivate an audience to want to see them win or lose, you know. So we'd always, you know, do that. And let's face it, unless you were there, you didn't realize, and, you know, Brian will tell you, 9 times out of 10, those things were a damn shoot. We didn't know half the time who was going to win because guys would just go off script and be like, well, yep, you got it, kid. We'd be like, what? Bruce might be staring like, wait, what are you talking about? Most of those people got hired because when we did not expect them to be hired.
Right.
That's it. That's real.
Yeah.
You know, it started with the one kid, the very first one, and Ric Flair the whole day was like, all right, screw this kid, I ain't gonna do it, blah, 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 blah. I mean, the whole day. Then he gets out there, Rick says no, kid cuts promo for it to kick out, gets another chance, and Rick goes, okay, yeah, you're in. And Bruce like, what? Wait, hold on. So go back and watch it and watch my reaction to Bruce. How many times we both looked at it, that didn't go the way we thought it was going to go. So, but here's the thing, all right? And you can choose to do it any way you want. It's your circus, it's your monkeys, all right? And even on Netflix, you know, I think one of the great things about Greg Whiteley was that he sold more who the wrestlers were, and not so much pulled the curtain back so much to where you saw the magic. Okay. You did it enough to give you a better appreciation and tell a story, but he didn't do it so much that it ruined it. And here's why I caution against pulling the curtain back too far. And I always use this analogy, and it's the best way to describe it. Literally, life is the Wizard of Oz, period. Okay? Wizard of Oz starts, it's black and white, it's bleak, it's workaday life out on a farm or wherever you want in that world. There's no color, there's no excitement. It's nice. Okay? Now we go to Oz. It's bright, it's colorful. Got some chick floating down in a bubble. House fell on another one, right? Toes curled up. Okay? We got flying monkeys. We've got, little people running around, despicable, I mean, just animals running around, dancing, singing. All of this stuff is possible. We've got talking scarecrow, Tin Man, lion, all of this is possible till we get to the end of the movie. And now we start pulling the curtain back, and we pull it back so far that now we see it's just some little old band twisting knobs and pushing buttons. And if we'd have pulled the curtain halfway back, hey, we just revealed it, but we didn't reveal how he was doing it. Cool. But we pulled it all the way back, and now at the end of the movie, we're back in black and white, and then we're back to the doll, and all the magic's gone. So, for you as an audience, you can choose. Nowadays, you can choose to have the curtain pulled full all the way back and take the magic away. Maybe for you, that's what you want. But I think there's a way, and there should be a way to where we can walk that line. And for the people that don't want it, then they don't have to have it done. Again, another good example to prove my point was when McGregor and what's his name? The other
Paul?
Gregor and
the big boxing match. It was Conor
Mayweather.
Mayweather.
Yeah.
Big build up, cutting promos, right? I don't know if you guys remember, big outrage when they found out that Conor McGregor and Mayweather were on the same jet. Oh my God, this is BS. Look, first off, if you don't think that thing's a work anyways from day one, you're out of your mind. But they got upset. And why did they get upset? Because it exposed the work, and now it's no more fun. The magic went away, ruined it. So there's a way, I think, that you can do it. But yeah, and I think, I think it came from a place of emotion for The Rock. And, I think that, there's a struggle within the wrestling business to really understanding, number one, that no matter what you think, what you feel, the business hasn't changed. I mean, there are aspects of it that evolved and are different, but you haven't reinvented the wheel. An audience in 1901 bought a ticket to just believe in who that wrestler was, who they were sold, and that there was a consequence to the win and the loss. 1931, 1948, 1963, today. I don't think people realize professional wrestling as we know it has been around since the late 1800s. So it's been over a century that we've been trying to kill the business, and it ain't dead yet.
Mhm.
Oh, Lord knows we've all tried, but we just haven't quite figured out a way to put the stake in the heart of it, and it just keeps sucking the blood out of us and keeps going.
So, Al, here's what we're going to do. Before we move to our third count, I'm going to have RJ send us up there. I do need you to do me again another favor. I need you to smack yourself again. There we go. Stop making so much fucking sense. All right?
I'll try to.
Oh boy. We thought we'd go one episode without Brian dropping an F-bomb.
I can't help it. He's making too much complete sense.
Is it two?
That's two.
You're getting better though. I will give you credit where credit's due though, Brian. But